G'day, thanks for joining this session. My name is Ashwin Ram. I'm a cybersecurity evangelist at Checkpoint. In this session, I will share with you what the current threat landscape looks like. Basically, what you need to be aware of and where you need to focus your attention. While the world has been busy adapting to this new normal, cyber criminals have been adapting their techniques and tactics to take advantage of this new phenomenon. And as always, Checkpoint research team and our incident response team have been busy unmasking the cyber criminals and their criminal activities. And it's my pleasure to share with you some of our findings. So this is a rough game plan. I'll start with some of the highlights from our mid-year cybersecurity report for 2020. And then I'll discuss with you some of the very interesting finds from the Checkpoint research team. One of the research I'm going to share with you is a brand new attack vector uncovered by our team. And in another find, we've uncovered a number of cyber espionage campaign in our region. So this is coming up. Now, if we look at the cyber attack category by region, the first half of 2020, unfortunately, it's not great news for our region. This is clearly not a competition that we want to be leading. As you can see, organizations in APAC experience far more cryptojacking, attacks against mobile phones, ransomware, and everything in between. And when we look at the top malware globally, Emotet is still the most widely used malware family. And it started its life as a banking Trojan, but it's evolved into something far more dangerous now. The reason attackers like to use Emotet is because it's just so versatile. It can easily be adapted to many different threat campaigns. Emotet is widely used to distribute other malware. It uses multiple methods to maintain persistence and uses very clever techniques to stay hidden. I have no doubt that we will be talking about this malware this time next year. And it's because it's just so successful. It can spread through phishing emails and either using malicious weaponized attachments or as links. Now, if you find Emotet in your environment, you need to be very, very concerned because there's likelihood very high percentage chance that there's other malware in your network as well. And if we look at the top malware in our region, we see that the first half of this year, XMRig, which is a malware used to mine Monero cryptocurrency, it's the front runner. Next is Agent Tesla, which is a remote access Trojan that functions as a keylogger and information stealer. It's capable of monitoring and collecting the victim's keyboard input and taking screenshots. And rounding up the top three is Remnet, which is a banking Trojan used to steal various banking credentials. Now, why am I telling you this? It's because we see so many organizations hopelessly underprepared to prevent these threats. So it's really important that you have a strong endpoint security that is able to identify these threats. This means using a sandbox, for example, and using security controls that can sever the communication between the command and control server and the compromised machine. When we look at how these malware is delivered, majority of it is via email. So having a very strong email security solution is also imperative, and you need to make sure you are able to identify every variant of these malware, not just some of it. That's why we see so many teams failing. Okay, and I can talk with some authority on this because at Checkpoint we have an incident response team that's usually engaged by businesses after they've been compromised, after they've been breached. So we know what works and what doesn't. So I urge you to focus on these top malware that you see on the screen here and make sure that your security control can identify all variants of this threat. Now, of course, we can't talk about this year's threat landscape without mentioning COVID-19. Right? COVID-19 is not just a major pandemic. It's actually also a very successful cyber attack theme. And we've seen a huge number of phishing attacks, scams, even an increase in cyber espionage as a result of this pandemic. At the peak, we saw almost 200,000 COVID-19 related cyber attacks per week. And interestingly, cyber criminals started to adapt their phishing campaign based on the various stages of the pandemic. Now, thousands of coronavirus-related domain names were registered, many of which would later be used for various scams. Some were used to sell fake COVID-19 vaccines and medication, and others were used for various phishing campaigns. And we even saw some used for malicious mobile application distribution. COVID-19 saw a number of phenomena, one of which was a dramatic shift to working from home. And with most users stuck at home, many of them started resorting to VPN apps to bypass geofenced content or streaming media content. And this year in March, NordVPN reported a 165% increase in their users in just a couple of weeks, and Atlas VPN reported approximately 124% rise in their user base. So what am I talking about here? Well, basically, you've got your users sitting at home and maybe they want to consume, say, Netflix, but they know that Netflix in the US, for example, may have content that is not available locally here in New Zealand and Australia. So what they'll do is they will install these apps that make it look like they're actually sitting in the US. It'll have US IP address. And so they'll be able to consume these the content of Netflix in US. Now, I'm just using that as an example. There's plenty of these streaming media platforms that users are trying to consume. And so the reason why you need to be concerned about this is that these VPN services all have many vulnerabilities, as you can see here on the screen, right? And these vulnerabilities can allow attackers a way onto your network. And it could allow them to launch all sorts of attacks on the device itself. For example, spying on your users, key logging, to remote code execution. The problem we have now is that a lot of users are accessing corporate data on personal devices. So this could be a potential way for your data to be compromised. Now, in order to be more agile, many organizations adapted a just do it mindset when it came to accelerating projects to allow cloud adoption and remote working. And in April, Internet Index Shodan reported a 41% increase in the number of RDP services available on the internet. Now, this is a very dangerous practice, and we've seen countless organizations being compromised because they've exposed their RDP services to the internet. And here's the evidence, by the way, that attackers are trying to take advantage of these exposed RDP services. You can see there's a huge increase in the rate of RDP brute force attacks. So please keep your RDP services behind a VPN and use multi-factor authentication. If you do just these two things, you will go a long way in securing your RDP environment. And when we look at public cloud, misconfiguration is still one of the top reasons for breaches. Earlier this year, a finance company had their data breached because they failed to properly secure their cloud assets. They had failed to use any form of encryption, password to secure their database, which basically contained very sensitive information or documents. And in another breach, thousands of personal documents belonging to students was leaked, again, due to unsecured storage in the cloud. The leaked data contained highly personal information, sensitive information, including tax information. And there are thousands of cases like these. And unfortunate part is that there are tools that exist that can easily and automatically remediate and secure these this environment. These tools can automatically encrypt your database. It can automatically secure your cloud assets and warn you if you're exposed. If you have cloud assets, or if you're customer, or if you're managing customers that have cloud assets, please don't take the chance. I urge you to have a look at Checkpoint's CloudGuard Dome 9. Right, within 10 minutes, you will know how exposed you are. So please do this before it's too late. And with restrictions to international travel, countries have had to change their espionage strategy. We saw a dramatic rise in cyber espionage. One such case was uncovered by our Checkpoint incident team, response team, earlier this year. The threat actor behind this campaign was the Dacon APT. Now, while not a new threat actor, their tools and techniques have certainly improved over the years. And for the last 5 years, they've actually been able to silently spread their footprint within APAC region. They came to our attention while the Checkpoint incident response team was engaged with a government agency in Asia. And it was during this investigation, actually, we discovered that the threat actors were using this compromised agency's environment to launch attacks against other governments. Now, the attack usually starts with a phishing email with a weaponized attachment. This is as soon as the victim opens the document, a file gets installed in the startup folder to maintain persistence. Now, this file was responsible for communicating with the attacker's command and control service and get next instructions for the next stage. Now, to hide their activity, the malware used an algorithm to figure out which server it should call home to and when. The information was calculated based on the time, the date, and the year. This ensured that only the attacker would know when their malware would call home and which server it would want to talk to. Now, in the last couple of months, this threat actor has also started targeting countries in Europe. And we've seen attacks against Germany and Ireland already. So the question I suppose I have for you is, do you know or do you have the intel to be able to identify this specific threat actor? If you don't, get in touch with us. We can help you with that. Now, in other cyber espionage cases, we discovered an attack against the Mongolian public sector. In this case, the threat actor was Vicious Panda. And again, phishing email was used to deliver the initial malware. The weaponized document in this particular case was using COVID-19 as its theme. And in April this year, an attack against Israel's water supply, where threat actor tried to raise the level of chlorine in the water to a point that would be hazardous to human health. It was claimed that Iran-backed threat actors were responsible for this threat. And Israel reportedly responded to the attack by disabling computer systems at a busy Iranian port, which resulted in backing up of marine traffic or maritime traffic. Now, by the way, speaking of cyber espionage, I want to bring to your attention a list of the top 25 vulnerabilities that, according to the NSA, are currently being exploited by Chinese backed state-sponsored threat actors. Now, based on Checkpoint's intel, we can confirm that New Zealand and Australia are both being targeted with these vulnerabilities. And here's the breakdown, by the way. As you can see, in both countries, government and military are the #1 target. And in the last 6 months, we've identified over 15,000 attacks against organizations in New Zealand. And Australia has had over 34,000 attacks using these vulnerabilities. Now, keep in mind that these are attacks that were discovered in an environment that had Checkpoint protecting it. The number is likely to be much, much higher because let's face it, not every environment will have a Checkpoint gateway. Now, I highly recommend you patch all of these 25 vulnerabilities right now. And by the way, as a side note, at the time of preparing for this talk, the only vendor that was able to prevent or block, identify, and prevent these threats to all 25 of them was Checkpoint. So I urge you to have a conversation with your security vendor if they are not yet providing you protection for all of these threats. The next research I want to share with you is a brand new way that cyber criminals are now attacking mobile phones. This is a classic example of how threat actors keep upgrading their techniques and tactics. And in this example, they've taken it to a whole new level. The malware that was in this particular example, the malware that was distributed was a variant of Cerberus, and it was purchased by the attacker from a malware as a service platform. So the attacker didn't even build or write the malware; they just rented it. Now, one of the attractive things about MDM, or mobile device management, is that you can manage your entire organization's mobile devices from a single console. Unfortunately, this is also its Achilles heel, because if the platform is breached, if it's compromised, so is your entire mobile network. And this is exactly what happened in this case. So this, by the way, is the platform to rent Cerberus malware. The attacker first gained access to the victim's MDM. They then used that MDM server to deploy and install Cerberus malware on the employees' mobile phones. Now, with this malware, the attacker was able to capture all the keystrokes on the device, including capturing credentials, stealing Google authentication data, as well as sending and receiving to SMS, including two-factor authentication. It allowed the attacker to control the device remotely. This malware could steal Gmail passwords. It could copy files from the phone to the command and control server belonging to the threat actor. The malware could make calls, could install, uninstall applications, and open URLs. So just think for a second the risk to your business if the administrator credentials for your public cloud environment, or the admin credentials to your RDP server or your VPN gateway, or the admin credentials to your Office 365 account falls into the attacker's hand. Now, you don't need me to tell you how catastrophic that will be. And with this attack, the attacker didn't even need to convince the employees of this organization to install their malicious app. They didn't even have to publish the app on app distribution platforms like Google Play or App Store. Right? Our investigation showed that all the mobile devices from this company was communicating with a Russian IP address. And we know that every credential used from all the unprotected mobile devices was reported to the attacker. We also know that every SMS was intercepted. And due to the extent of this malware's capability, this company had no choice but to reset to factory default every single mobile device that was compromised. And this is why it is absolutely critical for you to distinguish between mobile device management and mobile threat prevention. Managing a mobile device means installing applications, configuring settings, and applying policies to multiple devices at once. Securing a mobile device means protecting it from malware and threats like the one I just explained to you. So I urge you to take a look at Checkpoint's Sandblast Mobile. The next research I want to share with you is focused on IoT. So Amazon's Alexa is an AI-based virtual assistant developed by Amazon. And it's capable of voice interaction, right? Like playback music, you can set alarms, and you can carry out other tasks, including controlling smart devices as part of your home automation system. Now, just like you can enhance the capability of your smartphone by installing apps, users are able to extend Alexa's capability by installing skills, which are additional functionalities that are developed by third-party vendors. So keep in mind that these skills can be written by anyone with the right set of skills. The more skills you add to Alexa, the more tasks it can perform for you. But this also means that it has access to more of your data. Now, with user privacy in mind, our researchers set out to investigate if it was possible to compromise Alexa and gain access to sensitive information. And that's exactly what we were able to do. we found some misconfigurations on the Amazon platform that we were able to exploit using specially crafted links. Our research allowed us to silently install skills on the user's Alexa account. It allowed us to get a list of all installed skills on the user's Alexa account. We were able to silently remove an installed skill and get the victim's voice history with Alexa. We were able to gain access to victims' personal information. And a successful exploit required the victim to just click on one link, specially crafted link. So let's take a look at how this attack was executed. So in step one, the victim would click on a malicious link, link that directed them to Amazon.com, where we had code injection capabilities and we could control this page. In step two, using code injection, we sent a request on behalf of the user to the with their details to Alexa web server, and we received a list of all the installed skills on this Alexa account with some additional information as well. Now, Ajax, by the way, is just a type of request sent from a browser to a web server. And we used this type of request in our POC. In step three, we used the information we had just obtained from Alexa's server, and using a CSRF token, we removed one of the skills from the list we received. For this to happen, we actually exploited a cross-site script vulnerability that we discovered on Amazon's subdomain. Now, CSRF, by the way, is a type of attack where the attacker is capable of performing actions on behalf of the victim, and that's basically what we did. In step four, we installed a new skill with the same invocation phrase as the deleted skill. So, for example, play music, right? So even though the name of the skill was something the victim was used to, like play music, the actions that this skill would carry out is something completely different, something designed by the attacker. So in the fifth stage, what we did is once the user tried to use this invocation phrase, that they will trigger the attacker's skill and the malicious code would run. Now, Amazon doesn't record your banking login details or login credentials, but your interactions are recorded. And since we had access to the chat history, we could access the victim's interaction with the bank skill and get their data history. We could also get their username, their phone number, their home address, and other personal information from the user's profile. Now, the main point I want to make here is that IoT devices introduce new attack surface and they process our personal information. In this example, there is absolutely nothing the owner of the IoT device could have done because we compromise the infrastructure that manages the device. As a user of the IoT device, you could have done everything right, such as use a complex password, make sure that the device was behind a firewall and had the latest patches and updates and the latest firmware, and yet you could still have been compromised. So just keep in mind that and be glad that Checkpoint is finding these security vulnerabilities, and we are actively working with many of the world's largest vendors to secure their offerings. So to wrap up, attackers will exploit the news of the day. So make sure your security awareness training reflects the latest phishing attacks and educate your users about the latest threat trends. There's no point telling them about phishing attacks that happened a year ago. Cyber espionage attacks are on the rise. Carry out a compromise assessment as a first step. You need to know where you're starting from. Okay, this will be your baseline. Have a plan and execute a strategy that will secure your most exposed assets with the highest level of severity as a first step. These are going to be the low-hanging fruit for your adversaries. Uh, know the difference between a mobile device management and a um, uh, mobile threat prevention solution like Checkpoint's Sandblast Mobile. If you are not using Checkpoint Sandblast Mobile to secure your mobile phones, then I urge you to invest some time and look into this. Especially if you're carrying out your personal banking on your smartphone, or if you receive two-factor authentication on your phone, you can't let your mobile security be the low-hanging fruit. You can't let this be your weak link. Now, don't let IoT also be your weak link in your IoT or your cybersecurity strategy. Checkpoint has a team in New Zealand and in Australia. Please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help you with every one of these threats that I spoke about. Thank you for your time. I think we have some time for Q&A now.